They called it a celebration, a new beginning, a mansion inauguration. But when my husband leaned in and whispered, "My mother doesn't want you here," I realized tonight was never about joy. It was about power, control, and testing my limits. And baby, let me tell you something, limits are made to be crossed. Ladies and gentlemen, pull up a chair because life is about to remind you that family is not always about love. Sometimes family is a battlefield and you are the soldier you didn't know you signed up to be. There I was, walking into a mansion sparkling with chandeliers and polished floors and a crowd of smiling faces pretending everything was perfect. But one sentence from the man I trusted flipped the night upside down and sent a chill right to my soul. He whispered it so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "My mother doesn't want you here." And baby, that one sentence carried years of judgment, arrogance, and the subtle cruelty that people wrap in smiles and invitations. But let me tell you something real, when you know your worth you don't shrink, you rise. And that night I had to rise, not just for me but for every woman who has been told she is unwanted in a place she deserves to be. Tonight I am going to share how I faced exclusion, humiliation, and family politics and turned it into my own power. I want you to listen because this story is not just about a mansion or a mother-in-law or a husband. It's about self-respect, courage, and the kind of strength Auntie style that nobody can ignore. Recognition is power, and that is something I learned on a night that could have broken me if I had let it. When he whispered those words to me, "My mother doesn't want you here," I felt the chill roll down my spine as if the air itself had turned against me. I felt my pulse quicken, my stomach tighten, and my chest constrict, but I did not act immediately. I stopped and breathed. I let the words land fully so that I could understand them, not just hear them. You see, recognition is not about reacting. Recognition is about seeing clearly, about understanding exactly what is happening before you give away your energy or your peace. Recognition is about naming the forces at work and refusing to be blindsided by them. That night I recognized fear disguised as control. I recognized judgment disguised as etiquette. I recognized arrogance disguised as familial concern, and once I saw it clearly I realized that power had shifted to me. I recognized that his whisper was an attempt to test me, to see if I would crumble or comply. People do this often, especially in families where hierarchy and approval matter more than love. They will whisper in your ear doubts about your worth, about your place, about your value, hoping to see you shrink and disappear, hoping to watch you falter so they can feel larger in comparison. That is exactly what I was up against. That single sentence was a loaded weapon wrapped in concern that sought to destabilize me, to make me question my presence. But instead of bending, I stood taller inside. Recognition allowed me to see it for what it was, not as a personal attack but as a tactic meant to unseat me. Once you recognize manipulation, the threat loses its power because you understand the game being played. I also recognized my own emotions in that moment. Shock hit first, followed by a surge of anger and then a flash of self-doubt. But recognition is also about noticing yourself. It is about being honest with your feelings without letting them control your actions. I felt the unfairness deeply. I felt the sting of exclusion. I felt the humiliation that can come from being told that in a room full of people who should celebrate you, someone does not want you. But I allowed myself to feel without acting out. I allowed recognition to settle into a calm center that anchored me while the storm raged around. Recognition is the difference between reacting and responding. It is the difference between being tossed by waves and standing steady on the shore. I recognized the dynamics of power in that room. The mansion glittered with wealth and influence. The chandeliers reflected more than light, they reflected status and the subtle hierarchies that can make people believe they can dictate who belongs and who does not. Recognition is seeing that this is not just about my worth as a daughter-in-law or as a wife, but about understanding the power they believe they hold and knowing that power is illusory when met with self-awareness. Recognition is understanding that the walls and the money and the smiles do not define me. My presence defines me, my confidence defines me, my poise defines me. Once I recognized that the mansion was just a setting, not a sentence, I felt my spine straighten and my head lift. I recognized my husband in that moment too. His words were a reflection not just of his mother's will but of his complicity. Recognition is about seeing people clearly, not just events. I saw that his whisper came from habit and fear, from a lifetime of navigating a mother who wielded control like a weapon. I recognized the choices he was being pressured to make and the way he had been trained to believe exclusion was an act of love or duty. Recognition does not excuse behavior, but it allows you to understand it fully without letting it dominate your own choices. Once I recognized him clearly, I could separate my emotions from his actions. I could love him without surrendering to manipulation. Recognition gave me clarity in a sea of potential chaos. I recognized the opportunity in that moment. Recognition is not just seeing what is wrong, it is seeing what is possible. I realized that this whisper of exclusion could be my moment to claim power, not shrink from it. I could respond with calm confidence. I could show presence without aggression. I could turn a test of loyalty and strength into a demonstration of my resilience and self-worth. Recognition allows you to see the hidden door in the wall, the chance in the challenge, the lesson in the adversity. I recognized that this was my moment to rise, not just for me but for any woman who has been told she does not belong in a place where she clearly does. I recognized my own voice and how I could use it. Recognition is about knowing your tools and your capabilities. I chose to speak not in anger but in poise. I chose to make my presence undeniable through demeanor, not confrontation. Recognition taught me that power is often quiet. It does not shout or demand. It simply exists fully and confidently so that everyone else is forced to acknowledge it. I realized I could wear a smile that concealed the fire inside, and every eye in the room would see me even if they refused to applaud. That is recognition in action. I recognized boundaries too. Recognition is understanding where you will allow intrusion and where you will stand firm. I could have let the whisper push me out, I could have questioned my place, I could have allowed self-doubt to creep in, but recognition told me that my boundaries were my own to set and maintain. I chose to remain present in the room as a declaration that my existence is not dictated by approval from others, even if they are family or wealthier or more traditionally powerful. Recognition of boundaries is the first step toward true empowerment, because without knowing where you stand you cannot claim space in the world. I recognized timing. Recognition is also knowing when to act, when to pause, when to observe, and when to assert. I did not respond immediately to the whisper with words. I let it simmer in my awareness. I let the room pass. By me, I let the eyes and whispers and the implied judgment settle while I watched and evaluated. Recognition allows you to measure the temperature of a situation before pouring gasoline or water on the fire. Knowing when to act and when to wait is the essence of power, and that is what recognition grants you. I recognized dignity in my posture and poise. Recognition is understanding that every movement, every gesture, every breath can carry weight. I stood tall, calm, composed, and deliberate. I smiled lightly when necessary, nodded subtly when spoken to, and otherwise let my presence speak louder than any protest. Recognition is seeing that you can communicate authority and confidence without a single word, just by being fully yourself. My presence became a statement of self-respect, impossible to ignore and impossible to diminish. I recognize that recognition is not passive, it is active. It is not simply noticing, it is interpreting and choosing. I had the choice to react to fear, react to shame, react to exclusion, or I could harness the moment to assert my worth without aggression. Recognition allowed me to see the ripple effect of every action, every glance, every word before it left me vulnerable. By recognizing, I transformed a moment designed to weaken me into a proving ground that strengthened me. Recognition allowed me to convert potential humiliation into empowerment. I recognized the long-term implications of that night. Recognition is seeing beyond the immediate. I knew that if I allowed a whisper to dictate my presence in that mansion, I would signal weakness to others who might try the same tactic in the future. I recognized that my stance in this one small moment would ripple into every interaction thereafter. Recognition is about strategy. It is about understanding how small choices build a larger narrative of power, dignity, and self-respect. That night I chose to build mine brick by brick. By the time the night was over, I had recognized more than just a whisper. I had recognized my own power, my own clarity, my own ability to navigate manipulation with calm poise and unshakable presence. Recognition gave me armor that money, wealth, and status could not pierce. Recognition showed me that whispers cannot dictate reality, that confidence is louder than exclusion, and that a woman who sees clearly cannot be diminished by anyone's attempt to silence her. Recognition is power, because once you see it, you can never be hidden again. Being present is a statement, and that night I realized that nothing announces power like simply existing fully in the space where someone does not want you. When my husband whispered those cruel words, I could have stepped back, I could have shrunk, I could have disappeared into the shadows of his mother's expectations and the glittering intimidation of that mansion, but instead I chose presence. Presence is not just showing up. Presence is an act of defiance, an assertion of self-worth, a refusal to allow someone else to dictate your value or your right to occupy space. I walked through those grand doors, held my head high, and felt the air around me shift as if the room itself was testing whether I belonged or whether I would collapse under the invisible weight. Every step I took was deliberate, not to be aggressive or loud, but deliberate to announce that I existed fully, that I carried my dignity with me, and that I was not invisible. When someone attempts to make you feel small, their power relies on your hesitation, on your doubt, on the tiny invisible movements that whisper, "I am not worthy." Presence counters that. Presence screams in silence, "I am here, I am not afraid, I am not diminished." That is why even a small step forward becomes monumental when faced with opposition, because it signals that no matter what is said or implied, you will not be erased. I walked past the towering chandeliers, past the polished floors, past the women in sparkling dresses and men in crisp suits who had all been trained to admire status and wealth more than honesty and kindness. I felt their eyes and their judgment trying to stick to me like invisible glue, but I allowed the attention to pass over me without altering the rhythm of my steps. Presence is about owning your body in a space. It is about knowing that every movement communicates confidence even if no words are spoken. I let my shoulders relax and my spine straighten and my gaze sweep the room without hesitation, and in that moment I realized that presence is louder than any whisper. Being present also means being grounded in yourself. The mansion was intimidating. Its walls were lined with portraits and its rooms filled with the echoes of power and money and tradition. My husband's mother had cultivated a presence of authority that could silence a room, and yet here I was walking through it fully aware of my own value. Groundedness is what makes presence formidable. When you are rooted in your own worth, no external display can shake you. I reminded myself with each step that my place was not defined by approval but by self-respect, and that awareness gave me a strength that shimmered in every glance and every gesture. I recognized the subtle tests in that room. Presence is not passive. Presence is a series of deliberate choices to communicate who you are without compromise. I knew there were whispers behind me and looks exchanged across the polished tables, and I understood that everyone was assessing my reaction, hoping to see hesitation, hoping to see weakness. But I refused to provide it. I moved as if the room itself had no power over me, as if the chandeliers and carpets and smiles were merely background for the declaration I was making through my posture, my walk, my expression. Presence is a weapon in spaces that try to diminish you. It silently announces that you are not subject to their judgment. I used my presence strategically. I smiled lightly when appropriate to ease tension without conceding authority. I nodded when spoken to politely without shrinking. I engaged in conversation deliberately, choosing my words to reflect intelligence, composure, and self-assuredness. Each small interaction became a statement that I belonged and that my value was not contingent on anyone's approval. Presence is not simply existing. It is actively shaping perception by showing unwavering confidence in your own being. Every smile, every word, every glance sent a message that I could not be intimidated or sidelined. I noticed how my presence affected my husband. He had hoped to subtly control the night through whispered warnings and implied expectations. He had believed I would falter and allow the room to define my place. But my deliberate and calm presence removed his leverage. Recognition of presence is about understanding how your being communicates without aggression and how that affects those around you. By choosing to remain visible, confident, and composed, I disrupted the power dynamic he had tried to orchestrate. Presence had become a tool of quiet but undeniable authority. I also noticed its impact on the other guests. Some whispered and turned their heads expecting to see doubt or fear, but instead they saw composure and confidence, and they were forced to recalibrate their assumptions. Presence commands attention not through volume but through certainty. When someone walks fully into a space knowing they belong, the room cannot ignore them. Presence is about owning your right to exist without apology and letting that ownership ripple outward so that others cannot diminish your position even if they try. Being present requires resilience. Every step through that mansion required me to suppress the surge of old insecurities and fear. Every time someone looked at me critically, I had to reinforce in my mind that their judgment did not define me. I had to remind myself that their discomfort with my presence was their problem, not mine. Resilience is the backbone of presence. Without it, presence becomes hollow, and without it, opposition can break you. But with it, your stance becomes unshakable, your voice silent but potent, your existence undeniable. I practiced patience in my presence. I understood that every glance, every step, every word is a thread in the fabric of perception. Rushing or reacting would have weakened my position. Remaining deliberate and measured allowed me to communicate confidence and strength without needing to argue or defend myself. Presence is amplified by patience because it shows that you are unafraid of scrutiny, unshaken by judgment, and unwilling to compromise your integrity for comfort or approval. I also recognize the importance of visibility. Some people choose invisibility when confronted with hostility, but true presence requires being seen. I moved deliberately through the mansion as if each room were a stage and I was the lead actor asserting my role. Visibility is a statement. It is an act of courage. By being fully present, I demonstrated that I am not negotiable and that my dignity cannot be sidelined or dismissed. Presence is more than survival. It is a declaration that your life, your worth, and your choices matter. Throughout the night, I embraced presence as power. I watched as subtle judgments fell flat because I did not acknowledge them. I engaged only when necessary and with poise. I allowed my posture, expression, and voice to communicate certainty and self-assurance. Presence became my shield and my announcement that no whisper or glance could diminish me. I realized that power is not always about confrontation. Sometimes it is about showing up fully in spaces that seek to exclude you and letting your being speak louder than any words could. By the end of the night, I could feel the shift. The tension that had been placed around me was neutralized not through argument but through existence. Presence does that. It disrupts assumptions. It commands attention. It transforms power dynamics without ever raising your voice. I walked away from that mansion knowing that my deliberate presence had rewritten the narrative of the evening. I had shown strength. I had asserted belonging. I had turned exclusion into affirmation. Presence had been my tool, my shield, and my statement of self-respect, and it worked because I recognized its power and wielded it with clarity and purpose. Calm is your secret weapon, and that night I discovered how much truth there is in that saying. The mansion glittered with chandeliers, the guests were dressed in their finest, and yet beneath the shine there was tension that could be felt in the air like static electricity waiting to spark. When my husband leaned in and whispered that his mother did not want me there, I felt my heart tighten and my stomach twist, and my first instinct was to react to the sting of exclusion and the humiliation of being subtly attacked, but I remembered that calm is more powerful than reaction, and I drew it in like a shield around me and I let it settle deep inside. Calm is not weakness, it is strength under control. It is fire that does not burn the wrong targets. It is water that can erode the walls of hostility without destroying yourself in the process. I breathed slowly and deliberately, and I felt the tension in my shoulders ease slightly, as if the act of conscious breathing reminded my body that I was in control of my own reactions. Calm is about mastering your internal landscape before the external can shake you. I noticed every glance, every whisper, every subtle movement aimed to provoke and unsettle me, but I allowed the calm within to act like an anchor, holding me steady while the world tried to tilt me off balance. It is in calm that clarity grows, because when emotions are raw and uncontrolled, you cannot see strategy, you cannot see opportunity, you cannot see how to protect your dignity. I walked through the rooms with a deliberate serenity that drew attention, not because I demanded it but because calm has a magnetic quality that radiates confidence. Guests whispered and glanced and assessed, and yet my composed demeanor made it impossible for them to predict my reactions. Calm is a secret weapon because it makes people underestimate you until it is too late. They assume that anyone who does not visibly flinch is passive or weak, when in fact calm is a quiet assertion of authority that cannot be shaken by the judgment of others. Calm allowed me to listen without absorbing insult. When my husband whispered and tried to control my presence, he expected a reaction, a collapse, perhaps an argument. Instead, I stood silently confident, letting the words float past me without lodging in my mind. Calm allows you to observe without being drawn into drama. It allows you to separate the intentions of others from your own self-worth. It allows you to make decisions rooted in logic and strategy rather than fear or anger. By maintaining calm, I turned what could have been a moment of powerlessness into a moment of empowerment. I also used calm to control my voice and posture. Every word I spoke was measured, every movement intentional. I allowed my body to convey assurance without aggression. I smiled lightly when appropriate, not to surrender but to show control. Calm is communicated not just internally but externally through every gesture, every glance, and every inflection. It is the silent signal that you are steady, unshakable, and unyielding. In a room where whispers seek to diminish your value, calm communicates that your worth does not depend on approval. Being calm allowed me to think strategically. I noticed subtle dynamics and could choose when to engage and when to remain silent. Calm is not passive, it is active awareness, it is deliberate observation, and it is choosing responses that protect your dignity while undermining manipulation. I could see how the whispers and glances were designed to provoke a reaction, and by refusing to react I removed the leverage others thought they had over me. Calm gives you the ability to act intentionally rather than being tossed by every minor wave of tension. Calm also protects your emotional energy. If I had reacted with anger or frustration I would have fed the game I was surrounded by, but by holding steady my energy remained my own. Calm allows you to conserve power while others expend theirs attempting to provoke you. It allows you to endure long nights of subtle hostility without being diminished by them. The guests may have whispered the words they hoped would wound, but they could not penetrate the shield of calm I carried, because calm is a form of resilience that cannot be taken by force. I noticed how calm influences perception. People interpret calm as confidence, as strength, as unshakable composure, and that perception alters their behavior. When I smiled lightly when spoken to and maintained steady eye contact, they could not read fear or uncertainty in me, and it made them second-guess their attempts to unsettle me. Calm is contagious. It forces others to respond to you rather than manipulate you. By mastering my own inner stillness I subtly shifted the energy of the room. Calm is also a tool for navigating confrontation. There were moments when I was directly addressed or subtly challenged, and each time I relied on calm to maintain control. I did not raise my voice. I did not roll my eyes. I did not retreat. I allowed my demeanor to communicate the strength of my character and the integrity of my presence. Calm neutralizes tension while amplifying authority. It allows you to address challenges without losing composure or dignity. I reflected on the inner transformation calm provides. It is in moments of external chaos that calm demonstrates its value, because it is the quiet defiance that cannot be dismantled. It is the inner fortress that holds even when walls around you are trying to crumble. Calm is strength internalized and expressed subtly yet powerfully. It is an invisible armor that shields your mind and heart while projecting unshakable presence outwardly. I realized that calm also protects relationships. When my husband whispered trying to control my presence, he was testing both me and the environment. A loud emotional reaction could have escalated tension with him and his mother, but calm allowed me to maintain authority without damaging connections unnecessarily. Calm allows you to assert boundaries and command respect while minimizing unnecessary conflict. It allows you to navigate treacherous social dynamics gracefully and intentionally. By remaining calm I gained clarity and patience. I could wait for the right moments to engage strategically. I could observe the subtle interactions among the guests. I could measure when humor or intelligence or subtle charm could shift the energy in my favor. Calm provides space for planning and anticipation, because when emotions dominate your mind you cannot see the moves ahead. Calm is a lens through which the situation becomes legible and manageable. The power of calm extended beyond the mansion. I realized that the practice of maintaining composure in tense moments strengthens character permanently. Each time I faced a subtle attack or judgment I reinforced the skill of calm, which in turn fortified my confidence for future challenges. Calm is not situational, it becomes a habit, a force that lives inside you and guides you through every complex interaction with poise and assurance. Throughout the night I relied on calm as a weapon, as a shield, as a lens through which I could navigate every subtle attempt to undermine me. It allowed me to assert presence without aggression. It allowed me to command respect without loudness. It allowed me to survive tension without being diminished. It allowed me to transform whispers of exclusion into a proving ground of strength and dignity. By the end of the evening I could feel the difference. Calm had rendered whispers powerless. Calm had neutralized attempts to manipulate my husband into controlling me. Calm had projected authority without conflict and had made my presence undeniable. Calm had become not just a tactic but a way of being, a declaration that I would not be shaken or diminished by the judgments or expectations of others. Calm is your secret weapon because when mastered it protects you, empowers you, and silently commands respect in a way that reaction and anger never can. Humor diffuses tension, and that night I discovered how subtle levity can transform a room and shift power without confrontation. When my husband whispered in my ear that his mother did not want me there, I could have reacted with anger, frustration, or humiliation, and I could have let the situation overwhelm me, but instead I chose to use humor as a tool to navigate the tension. Humor is not about making light of serious situations, it is about creating space for yourself, it is about reclaiming control when others attempt to diminish you. I realized that a well-placed remark, a gentle laugh, or even a sly observation could disarm judgment and reveal confidence in a way that hostility never could. As I walked through the mansion I noticed the subtle glances, the whispered comments, and the careful positioning of people around me. They expected me to shrink, to avoid being noticed, to let their unspoken judgments take root. I could have complied, but humor allowed me to step into the space fully while disarming tension. A smile at a whispered insult, a light-hearted acknowledgement of a pompous comment, or a witty observation about the extravagance of the room sent a message that I was neither intimidated nor diminished. Humor is a form of power because it signals control, it signals awareness, and it signals that you are unafraid to navigate the complexities of social dynamics. I used humor strategically to redirect conversations. When a guest tried to make a pointed comment about my presence or questioned my background, I responded with a clever turn of phrase that diffused the sharpness of the comment without anger or defensiveness. Humor creates a pause, it interrupts negative energy and replaces it with engagement that is under your control. By using wit, I turned potential attacks into opportunities to demonstrate intelligence, composure, and confidence. Humor is not superficial, it is a tactical tool that shifts energy while preserving dignity. I noticed the effect on my husband. He had hoped that whispers and subtle pressure would undermine me, that I would falter or react in a way that allowed him or his mother to reclaim control. But my use of humor revealed that I was not easily shaken, that I understood the unspoken rules of the room, and that I could navigate them with grace and cleverness. Humor can be a mirror, it reflects confidence and awareness back to those who attempt manipulation, it shows that you are not naive or unprepared, it demonstrates that you are present and fully aware of the dynamics at play. Humor also served as a shield. It protected me from absorbing the negative energy around me. Instead of allowing judgment to weigh me down, I could laugh lightly or make a subtle joke and release tension from the environment. Humor is not about mockery, it is about deflecting hostility and asserting that your peace of mind remains intact. It is a quiet form of defiance that can destabilize attempts to provoke you and subtly shift the balance of power. I also used humor to connect with allies in the room. A well-timed observation or gentle playful remark can invite shared understanding among people who might otherwise remain silent. Humor builds bridges subtly, it fosters camaraderie and signals confidence to others. Allies often respond to wit with smiles or nods, and that small recognition reinforces solidarity without the need for open confrontation. Humor communicates that you are human and approachable, yet strong and unshakable all at once. Humor allows you to control narrative. In a room filled with status and expectations, people often try to shape the story to suit their own assumptions. By inserting humor at key moments, I was able to assert my own voice, shape interactions, and redirect focus without appearing aggressive or defensive. Humor transforms tension into engagement and demonstrates that you are the one guiding the rhythm of the room, not the judgments of others. I noticed how humor softens hostility. When someone attempted to make me uncomfortable or subtly exclude me, a lighthearted response disrupted their intent. Humor creates a pause in which hostility loses momentum and the room recalibrates. People are forced to adjust to your confidence because their efforts to provoke are deflected by the clever ease with which you respond. Humor is a way of reclaiming emotional space without confrontation. It is armor that can also be an invitation to engagement on your terms. Humor also reveals inner strength. It is not easy to remain witty or lighthearted when faced with exclusion or subtle attacks. Using humor requires self-awareness, emotional intelligence, and control. It signals that you are not bound by fear or insecurity, that you understand the dynamics at play, and that you are capable of navigating them with elegance and skill. Humor demonstrates resilience. It communicates that you can endure challenges and respond with creativity and poise. I found that humor shifts perception. Those who may have judged me or assumed weakness began to see confidence, intelligence, and composure. A room that was prepared to doubt or exclude me became a space in which my presence was undeniable and my voice respected even in silence. Humor communicates strength without needing to raise your voice. It signals awareness and it establishes authority in subtle yet powerful ways. Humor allows timing and strategy. By choosing when to inject levity and when to remain serious, you control the rhythm of interaction. The timing of a remark, the delivery of a smile, the subtle acknowledgement of irony can turn a tense moment into one that demonstrates your poise. Humor in this sense is not frivolous, it is deliberate, it is intentional, it is a calculated response that reinforces presence and confidence. I also used humor to maintain my own emotional balance. In situations of exclusion and subtle hostility, the tendency is to internalize pain and frustration. Humor allows a person to release tension without surrendering dignity. It offers a psychological escape that reinforces resilience. Each smile or clever remark reinforced my ability to navigate the room without compromising my integrity or self-respect. Humor became a form of silent rebellion. I was present fully in a space that was not welcoming, and yet I injected lightness to assert control. Humor can destabilize authority without aggression, it can disarm judgment without confrontation, and it can communicate confidence without arrogance. Each laugh or clever observation was a subtle but unmistakable signal that I would not be marginalized, that I understood the dynamics and that I was fully capable of navigating them. I noticed how humor influences energy. Negative tension cannot hold when met with composure and wit. The room shifts its focus because laughter or clever remarks redirect attention and subtly reframe perception. Humor gives you control over the emotional landscape of the environment without needing to assert dominance. It allows you to guide interactions and signal strength while remaining graceful. By the end of the evening, I realized that humor had protected me from humiliation, it had projected confidence, it had connected allies, it had disrupted hostility, and it had communicated strength. It had transformed whispers of exclusion into opportunities to assert my presence gracefully and strategically. Humor is not merely entertainment, it is a sophisticated tool of power, social navigation, and personal resilience. The power of humor lies in its subtlety and intentionality. Each well-timed observation or light-hearted response can diffuse tension without diminishing authority. It shows awareness of dynamics, emotional intelligence, and the courage to assert self-worth without aggression. By remaining humorous yet composed, I demonstrated that exclusionary tactics cannot diminish someone who carries both awareness and poise. Humor diffuses tension because it reframes the narrative. What could have been a night defined by exclusion and judgment became a stage on which I controlled perception, demonstrated resilience, and asserted presence. Humor in its subtlety communicates strength, clarity, and confidence in ways that reactionary anger never can. That night I learned that laughter and wit are not frivolous but essential weapons in navigating power dynamics with grace, control, and dignity. Allies change the game, and that night I realized how much truth there is in surrounding yourself with people who see your value when others try to erase it. In the glittering mansion, my husband's whisper had attempted to undermine me, and the subtle glances and whispers from others reminded me that not everyone would welcome my presence, but I also noticed quietly that there were people whose eyes held warmth and curiosity and respect, and I recognized them as potential allies. Allies are not always obvious. Sometimes they are the ones who remain silent in the crowd and offer subtle gestures of acknowledgement, the small nods, the fleeting smiles, the shared laughter that tells you you are not alone. Recognizing allies is as important as recognizing hostility because strength is amplified when it is shared. I began to cultivate subtle connections without drawing attention to myself. Presence alone attracts allies, but intentional engagement strengthens them. I leaned slightly toward a guest who had smiled at me knowingly, and I exchanged a few words lightly and carefully enough that it felt natural but intentional enough to establish connection. Allies can be powerful because they shift the dynamics of a room in ways that may not be immediately visible. One ally who respects you can counterbalance multiple individuals who doubt or seek to undermine you. Allies are validation not in the shallow sense of flattery but in the sense of acknowledgement that you exist fully and deserve respect. I noticed that allies can influence perception without speaking loudly. The simple act of someone in the room giving you a nod or offering polite acknowledgement signals to others that you are noticed and accepted. This small act is disproportionately powerful in spaces where judgment is being cast. Allies do not need to confront hostility directly for their presence to matter. Recognition by others quietly reinforces your legitimacy and shifts power dynamics. It is the silent strength that undergirds your confidence. I used subtle humor and warmth to strengthen these budding alliances. Allies respond to sincerity but also to skillful navigation of the environment. I smiled when appropriate and engaged lightly in conversation to establish rapport. Humor in this context becomes a bridge, not a shield. It demonstrates that you are approachable yet discerning and capable of discerning those who support you from those who seek to destabilize you. Allies are drawn to authenticity and composure, and by remaining grounded I naturally strengthen these connections. Allies change the game because they give you leverage in spaces where you may otherwise be isolated. The mansion was filled with people who could attempt to exclude me and create an environment of tension, but by cultivating allies quietly I was no longer entirely alone. Their subtle recognition served as reinforcement for my presence. Allies provide emotional support and validation and also shift the perception of others in subtle ways. They signal that exclusion is not absolute and that judgment may be counterbalanced. I also realized that allies can act as mirrors. Their recognition reflects back to you your own value. When the night was tense and I felt the weight of judgment pressing against me, their small gestures reminded me that I belonged and that my presence was not negotiable. Allies reinforce confidence not through words alone but through actions that demonstrate acknowledgement and respect. In the presence of allies your strength is magnified because you are reminded that your worth is recognized beyond your own perception. I carefully observed how my allies interacted with others. Some subtly intervened when necessary with a comment or glance to redirect judgment or soften criticism. Allies can protect you in ways that are indirect yet profoundly effective. Their awareness and subtle influence in the room allows you to navigate hostile spaces with greater ease and confidence. The cumulative effect of even small actions by allies can shift the atmosphere and signal that you are not marginalized. I recognize that allies also teach patience and strategy. Not every moment requires engagement or reaction. Allies allow you to move deliberately knowing you are not alone. Their presence provides a buffer against isolation and allows you to make choices from a position of strength. Allies extend your vision beyond your own perspective because they offer insight, encouragement, and sometimes the subtle validation necessary to navigate a complex social environment. I noticed that allies change not only the dynamics of the room but also your own emotional state. Their quiet acknowledgement and presence reduce the sense of threat and allow you to act with composure. Emotional energy is contagious and positive reinforcement strengthens your ability to maintain presence, calm, and humor. Allies support not by dominance but by subtle affirmation, which provides a foundation for confidence and action. I cultivated conversations that subtly reinforced connections. I listened more than I spoke and offered observations or light remarks that demonstrated intelligence and engagement. Allies respond to these cues because it shows awareness and composure. The connections I built were quiet but meaningful and allowed me to feel supported even when others attempted to intimidate or undermine me. Allies are not always obvious participants, but their impact is profound. I also observed that allies can act as deterrents. When others perceive that you have support, even subtle support, they hesitate in their attempts to provoke or undermine you. Allies shift the social balance without needing confrontation. Their recognition signals that exclusion or judgment will not be absolute and that you are reinforced not only internally but externally. This subtle form of power is often more effective than direct opposition because it changes the expectations of behavior without creating overt conflict. I reflected on the role of alliances in past challenges. I realized that whenever I had succeeded in difficult situations, it was rarely alone. Allies, even if small in number or subtle in action, had always provided reinforcement, validation, and perspective that allowed me to navigate adversity. Recognition of allies and strategic cultivation of relationships transforms spaces where judgment or hostility may exist into environments where your presence is affirmed and respected. I carefully managed my interactions to strengthen alliances without appearing opportunistic. Allies respond to authenticity, not manipulation. My engagement was sincere, calm, deliberate, and strategic. I recognized those whose respect and acknowledgement were genuine and nurtured those connections while remaining cautious of those whose gestures were performative or disingenuous. Presence and authenticity attract allies because people naturally respond to those who carry themselves with clarity and dignity. I noticed that my allies created an invisible network of support. Even small gestures of acknowledgement shifted attention away from attempts at exclusion and toward engagement that was positive and reinforcing. Their presence gave me confidence to move through the mansion fully aware of my own value and unshakable in my composure. Allies multiply your influence because they reinforce perception that you belong and deserve respect. I realized that allies are also emotional anchors. In moments of subtle attack or tension, their presence reminded me that I was not isolated. Their recognition reassured me and strengthened my ability to maintain calm humor and presence. Allies provide reinforcement that allows you to remain grounded and confident even when opposition is present. Their impact is often invisible yet essential. Throughout the night I observed how my allies quietly influenced the flow of events. Their acknowledgement shifted social dynamics subtly yet decisively. Whispers and glances intended to undermine were less effective because the presence of allies altered perception. By nurturing these relationships I created a network of support that reinforced my presence, authority and confidence without the need for confrontation. Allies change the game because they provide a foundation for strategic navigation, emotional reinforcement, and social influence. By the end of the evening I realized that cultivating allies had transformed my experience completely. Where whispers had once threatened to diminish me, the subtle support and recognition of allies strengthened my resolve, reinforced my confidence and shifted the power dynamics in the room. Allies are not just companions, they are strategic extensions of your strength, amplifying your presence, protecting your emotional energy, and ensuring that exclusion cannot prevail. They change the game because their support is quiet but undeniable, subtle but transformative, reinforcing your ability to exist fully and confidently in spaces that seek to marginalize you. Walking away with dignity if necessary is one of the most powerful acts a person can make, and that night I realized that choosing to stay is not always the strongest move. Sometimes strength is measured by knowing when to step back and reclaim your power in silence. The mansion sparkled with chandeliers and polished floors, and the laughter of guests echoed around me, but beneath it all there was tension that could be felt like a pressure against my chest, and every whisper, glance and subtle maneuver reminded me that my presence was being tested. Walking away with dignity does not mean surrender, it does not mean fear, it means understanding the limits of a situation and preserving your strength when hostility is present. I had invested energy, presence and strategy throughout the evening, and yet I recognized that staying in an environment where judgment and exclusion are constant can slowly erode confidence and composure. Walking away is a deliberate choice. It is a declaration that your worth is not dictated by approval or acceptance. It is a statement that no matter how glamorous or high profile the surroundings are, your self-respect is non-negotiable. I stepped into a quiet corner and allowed myself a moment to breathe and to assess the dynamics before making a conscious decision that would affirm my dignity and my control. Every step toward the exit was intentional and measured. I did not rush, I did not look back, I did not react to the murmurs of surprise or the eyes that followed. Walking away is an art. It requires calm awareness of the environment and deliberate acknowledgement of your own value. It communicates silently that you are in control of your own presence, that you are capable of asserting boundaries, and that you refuse to be diminished by the subtle power plays of others. In that moment my movement became a symbol of self-respect, a quiet but unmistakable proclamation that I would not compromise my integrity for comfort or approval. I noticed the reactions of those around me. Some were surprised that I would leave without confrontation, some were impressed by the composure of my steps, some whispered and speculated about my reasons, but I remained unaffected by their interpretation. Walking away with dignity is about maintaining control over the narrative without needing to explain yourself or justify your actions. It is about demonstrating that your choices are rooted in clarity and self-awareness and not in reactionary emotion. The power of walking away is amplified by the silence that accompanies it, the pause that allows others to reflect on their own behavior while you remain anchored in your integrity. I reflected on the emotional impact of walking away. When faced with repeated subtle attacks or exclusion, remaining in the space can drain resilience and self-confidence. Choosing to leave allows you to preserve your energy and redirect it toward environments and people that reinforce your value. Walking away is not retreat, it is strategic repositioning. It is the ability to recognize that presence is not always synonymous with strength when the conditions are toxic. Strength can be in endurance, but it can also be in recognizing the moment when stepping back asserts power more effectively than confrontation. I maintained calm and grace throughout the exit. I did not hurry, I did not apologize, I did not engage in defensive explanation. Instead, I allowed my posture, composure, and measured steps to communicate authority and control. Walking away silently communicates dignity and self-possession. It demonstrates that you are not dependent on validation and that you carry your worth internally rather than externally. Every movement became a message that my strength was inherent and not contingent on the acknowledgement of others. Walking away also allows space for reflection and preparation. As I exited the mansion, I allowed my mind to absorb what had occurred, to process the dynamics, and to plan my next steps without being caught in the immediate emotional reaction of the moment. Strategic withdrawal provides clarity, insight, and perspective that is often obscured when you remain trapped in conflict or tension. It is an act of foresight and wisdom that ensures future interactions are approached with deliberate awareness rather than reactive emotion. I recognize that dignity is preserved in how you carry yourself even while leaving. The mansion was grand, the guests were stylish, and judgmental eyes followed my path, but I allowed neither the opulence nor their perception to influence my internal sense of strength. Walking away with dignity requires self-control. It requires awareness of your own boundaries and an unwavering commitment to your own values. It is a declaration that your presence is not defined by external acceptance but by internal affirmation. I reflected on the lessons of walking away. It does not diminish courage or determination, in fact it often magnifies it. Choosing to remove yourself from toxicity while maintaining composure is a demonstration of power that is more difficult to master than confrontation. It requires insight, patience, and confidence, and it communicates that you are the arbiter of your own presence and worth. Walking away is an act of courage because it demands trust in your own judgment and in your own strength to thrive outside the immediate environment of judgment and exclusion. I also noticed how walking away changes perception. Those who intended to exclude or diminish you are forced to confront the reality that your value cannot be dictated by their approval. Their whispers and glances are rendered ineffective because your dignity creates a space that they cannot penetrate. Walking away silently demonstrates that you are neither defeated nor reactive. You are self-assured and fully in control of your own narrative and your own choices. The act of leaving allowed me to reclaim emotional and mental space. In a room dominated by subtle hostility, the ability to extract oneself without losing composure preserves resilience and ensures that judgment cannot erode your confidence. Walking away is not an act of submission, it is an act of self-preservation and empowerment. It allows you to maintain clarity, focus, and poise while neutralizing the attempts of others to assert control over you. I maintained awareness of my body language throughout the departure. My posture was tall, my shoulders relaxed, my gaze steady, and my movements deliberate and fluid. Every step conveyed calm, strength, and self-respect. Walking away with dignity is as much about internal attitude as external expression. It is the synchronization of thought, emotion, and action to communicate unassailable confidence. Others may speculate, they may whisper, they may judge, but your composure communicates an unshakable truth about your own authority and self-worth. I reflected on the psychological impact of walking away. It reinforces your own understanding that your presence is valuable, that your dignity is not negotiable, and that your choices are informed by strategy, not reaction. Walking away strengthens resilience by allowing you to control your environment rather than being controlled by it. It asserts that self-respect is paramount and that no external circumstance or judgment can dictate the measure of your worth. By the time I reached the exit, I had fully reclaimed my power. I had demonstrated presence without confrontation, calm without submission, humor without trivialization, and alliances without dependence. But walking away was the final and most powerful statement. It was the culmination of strategy, awareness, and self-respect. Walking away is a visible and invisible message that you are neither diminished nor defeated. You are sovereign in your decisions and steadfast in your value. The mansion faded behind me. The whispers and glances and judgments were rendered powerless because I carried my dignity intact and unshakable. Walking away with grace communicates strength to those who remain. It signals that respect cannot be coerced and that your worth is self-determined. It is a lesson in subtlety, strategy, and self-possession that resonates far beyond a single moment in a single room. Walking away is a tool that every person should understand and master because not every situation can be won through confrontation. Some spaces demand that you assert power through presence, composure, and strategic exit. It requires awareness of dynamics, recognition of boundaries, and confidence in your own internal authority. The ability to walk away without surrendering dignity transforms adversity into empowerment and ensures that no whisper judgment or exclusion can erode your self-respect. That night I learned that leaving a room is not the same as losing a battle. It is winning on your own terms. It is asserting authority over your own existence and refusing to allow others to define your value. Walking away with dignity is the ultimate act of self-respect because it communicates confidence, control and strength all at once while neutralizing attempts at manipulation or judgment. It is both subtle and undeniable, quiet yet profoundly powerful. By the end of the night I knew that the ability to walk away with dignity had preserved my composure, strengthened my confidence and reinforced my clarity. It allowed me to remain unshaken, to reclaim my narrative, and to move forward into spaces that align with my value and my principles. Walking away is not passive. It is active, deliberate, and strategic. It is one of the most potent tools for anyone navigating exclusion, subtle hostility, or power dynamics.